One part of the characterization of Marvel's hero, the Hulk, which never fails to intrigue me, is the psychological struggle between Bruce Banner and the big roided out rage monster he sometimes turns into. And in continuing my long-running series looking analytically at the characters and themes of Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, this is what I want to talk about in this video, the complex and often troubled relationship we see between Hulk and Bruce. Throughout the character's history of publication and adaptation, this dynamic has been handled and depicted a whole bunch of different ways. Sometimes the Hulk is a transformed Banner, but one who is completely savage, rampaging and destroying indiscriminately. Sometimes Banner gets rid of Hulk completely. Sometimes Hulk gets rid of Banner completely, but in Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, both of these personalities exist in a somewhat uneasy compromise. It doesn't look like a stable solution a lot of the time, and this delicate balance is easily upset by the foes of the Avengers, but I want to suggest that this depiction of Bruce's relationship with the Hulk might indeed be one of the best and healthiest ways of dealing with Big Green that we've seen, and that there's some real psychological evidence to back this up. But first, let's rewind. We don't meet Hulk to start with, we meet Banner. He's in human form and on the run from Ross and the Hulkbusters, but he's not just trying to keep a low profile. In a move which, as we shall see, is typical of his personality, Banner is putting the needs of others above his own, even when in a bit of a sticky situation. He's seeking out the Absorbing Man, who'd recently escaped from the Cube, in order to learn more about that prison's nefarious aims. But since this is an Avengers cartoon and not a show about rehabilitating supervillains, Absorbing Man decides he wants to try and beat up the Hulk, which...
not a great plan.
But yeah, S.H.I.E.L.D. eventually capture Hulk and lock him up in Banner form, at which point we get this exchange.
I've told you again and again, Bruce, we'll find a cure for the Hulk. The Cube is the most advanced gamma radiation research facility on the planet.
S.H.I.E.L.D. and Ross are lying to you. They don't want cures. They want to know how to control these monsters. Listen to me, Leonard. You have to help me because right now, the Hulk is the only hope we've got.
And this is the first look we get at Bruce and the Hulk's nuanced relationship. Unlike, say, either of the Hulk films we saw in the 2000s, this show starts at a point where Banner has grown to accept and respect the Hulk's existence. He's not trying to cure himself. As a result, the dynamic we see with Banner and Hulk isn't the typical one people tend to expect if they've only ever seen a Hulk film or the old TV show, a tragic story about a brilliant scientist and his failure to repress a monstrous part of himself which inevitably breaks out and endangers his surroundings. No, Earth's Mightiest Heroes' Hulk plotline is a story about a pair of beings who have begun to tolerate and maybe even cooperate with each other, despite their bizarre existence and connection. The next key moment comes after the breakout. Hulk escapes the Cube and seems poised to flee the area to evade the forces which are surely even now beginning their attempts to catch him again. But he stops in a diner
Chicken soup.
And sees the news, sees Graviton loose in New York, and then Banner speaks to him. Banner's appearance is, of course, in Hulk's mind. He's not actually just vibing out in the diner coincidentally, but in this scene of imagined conversation, we learn a few things. First, we see that just as Hulk is an inseparable part of Banner's headspace, Banner too is a voice always audible to Hulk, even when he doesn't want to hear it. This uneasy coexistence is represented visually in a pretty effective way. From Hulk's perspective, Banner's always somewhere in the nooks and crannies of his brain, and we see that in visual form, and this visualized idea of uneasy coexistence is important to the character for the rest of the series, because Hulk is a very troubled character. He's often surly with the team, and seems reluctant to join, seems conflicted to leave, and so on. We don't get to inhabit his mind like we do in this episode very often at all, but we don't really need to. The show implies that Hulk is always grappling not only with himself, with the reality he lives of being hated and feared by the world, but also grapples with the presence of this other personality within his own mind. That's a lot for anyone to handle, even if you're not constantly being attacked by literal armies. The other thing we learn is that somewhere within him, the Hulk shares Banner's essential desire for altruism. That's why he's persuaded to go out and help in New York, even though it puts him in danger. A danger we see very clearly at the end of the Breakout two-parter. And he sticks his neck out regardless. But there is a condition to this help.
If I do this, then you do something for me.
What?
I stay the Hulk, not Banner.
I think there's two ways we can read this scene. One is that it's the presence of Banner's personality which leads to the Hulk becoming a force for good, because Banner believes in the Hulk's potential to help people, and that Hulk is reluctant to do this to become a hero. He only does it because of this deal. He'll do whatever Banner wants if he gets to stay himself. And that's a price Banner is willing to pay, essentially sacrificing his own existence in order to push the Hulk to help others. But there's another interpretation, and I think it's one I prefer, that Hulk actually wants to help people himself, that he wants to make up for the hurt and destruction he's caused while not being in control of himself or while being hunted. And the reason behind his offer to Banner is so Hulk can be recognized as the one behind this heroism and benevolence, not Banner. It's a naive hope, as we go on to see. The world hates and distrusts Hulk fundamentally, but the Jolly Green Giant wants the opportunity to prove that he isn't just a rampaging beast of fury, one who is occasionally directed towards good by Banner, but an authentic being himself who is willing and capable to use his remarkable strength for the common good. Like I say, this is the interpretation I prefer, but I don't really think the show ever gives us a clear answer one way or the other, and I respect that choice. Ambiguity like this is interesting. Either way though, this struggle between Hulk and Banner on what they should do, on who they should be, it makes for interesting television. And despite this struggle for autonomy, by the time Earth's Mightiest Heroes gets into its swing, the Hulk-Banner dynamic is at a point where each personality is willing to trust the other to a point, and cede control when needed. Part of the reason Hulk comes to blows with the other Avengers in the episode Some Assembly Required is because he thinks Banner is telling him that he should leave, and not trust his teammates. As it turns out, the Enchantress was behind this, not Banner, but it shows that by this point Hulk knows it's a good idea, generally speaking, to listen to Banner, and when Hawkeye comes to find the Hulk in the Gamma World two-parter, despite the potential threat posed by the Archer, who, lest we forget, had helped to take down Hulk before, the Hulk lets Banner out to talk with him when it becomes clear that the world needs his expertise, and a similar thing happens the other way around. We find out in the episode Nightmare in Red that Banner gets 1 day per month to be himself, but when he realizes Hulk is needed, he lets him take over. So this uneasy coexistence eventually develops into a sort of partnership, and for a time at least it works. Now, the Hulk vs films are set in this universe too, and there's some evidence to suggest that maybe Hulk vs Thor takes place after the events of Earth's Mightiest Heroes, so maybe Bruce and Hulk don't manage to keep things running smoothly forever. But this dynamic keeps these characters interesting all throughout Earth's Mightiest Heroes 2 seasons, especially when you consider the alternative. We mentioned Hulk's cinematic appearances briefly earlier, and as I'm sure most of you are aware, the version of Hulk we saw in 2007's The Incredible Hulk is still featured today in the MCU, and while Hulk and Banner eventually reconciled in that universe, it took a very different form to the partnership we see them develop in Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Entirely off-screen between Infinity War and Endgame, the struggle for control and autonomy we see in these characters is resolved by them being fused together, in an adaptation of the Professor Hulk persona from the comics. And while Hulk had some fun moments in Endgame,
time travel!
It's very common to see people saying they didn't like this resolution. It felt too clean, too easy, and the fact that it happened entirely off-screen really cheapened Hulk's arc. And I feel these are fair criticisms, especially when one compares this resolution to what we see in Earth's Mightiest Heroes, an ongoing partnership where both versions of this man have learnt to accept their situation and begin to trust one another. The thing is though, as I suggested way back at the start of this video, I think that Earth's Mightiest Heroes' depiction of this uneasy coexistence of personalities in Hulk's head is not only more interesting to watch, but also more realistic. And of course, I don't mean that any version of the Hulk exists in real life, although I don't think you'd like Mel Gibson when he's angry. But the struggle to live with different personalities inside one's own body is something which affects many people in our world. I'm talking here about dissociative identity disorder, sometimes called multiple personality disorder. Think Moon Knight, but less ancient Egyptian divine zeal. Somewhere between 0.01 and 1% of the world's population experiences this disorder, in which they genuinely feel that another personality or personalities exist within their brain. Statistically, someone watching this probably has some form of dissociative identity disorder, and I think there's a comparison to be made here with Hulk. Now, at points in comics or shows, the Hulk has become something other than a variant personality for Bruce. Recently, for example, in the mainline Marvel continuity, the Hulk was retconned into being some sort of being from another dimension or something. But if we forget about that and just look at the way Bruce and Hulk's coexistence in one singular body are depicted in these properties, that is Earth's Mightiest Heroes and the MCU, similarities to dissociative identity disorder do become visible. And here's the thing, there's no magical cure for this disorder, no gamma lab in which to unite one's disparate personalities. People with DID go to therapy to learn to live with it and cope with the struggles it imposes. Through psychotherapy, people with this disorder can work to control their minds and minimize the condition's disruptiveness, but they can't just zap away these other personalities. So maybe one reason that the relationship between Banner and the Hulk feels more satisfying and interesting to watch in Earth's Mightiest Heroes compared to the MCU is that it mirrors real life. More specifically, the way Bruce stops trying to cure his condition and learns to understand and make the most of his unusual existence and build bridges with the Hulk is, psychologically speaking, the healthiest way he could deal with the Hulk. Towards the end of the show, we get suggestions that Hulk and Banner are reaching this sort of harmonious coexistence. We see traits of each personality coming through more and more while the other is present, like the way Hulk's speech seems more eloquent than ever before in the episode The Deadliest Man Alive, or the glimpse we get of Banner's foul temper. The character has reached a sort of benign equilibrium, and this happens just as he leaves the Avengers full-time roster. I think that if we had got to see more of this world, we might have seen Hulk reappear in a similar state, as close to a working fusion of his two halves as we'd ever seen, which is a pretty impressive accomplishment considering the way his team hung him out to dry in Season 2, letting him rot in a jail cell for like a really long time. In fact, I wonder if Hulk's relationship with the other Avengers deserves an entire video to itself. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in down below. But that's pretty much it for this one. I would love to hear what you thought though about this Hulk. Is he the healthiest version of Banner that we've seen? And how does this Hulk compare to his rocky trajectory in the MCU? And you know, if you feel like doing a little liking and subscribing, well, I'm not going to complain. But yeah, thanks for watching, see you next time.